Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lighten Up with Sunny Wilkinson. I'm Sunny Wilkinson, and I'm so pleased today to have as my special guest artist, Cindy Taggart. Hi, Cindy.
Hey, Sunny. It's so good to see
Hi.
you.
I am so pleased to have you with us. Um, Before we get started on our lovely journey and our chatting and catching up and talking about music and life and art, I have a little tradition, and today I am featuring the say that again, the pottery of several of the artists from the Potters Guild. I've been a potter for 7 years now. I can't believe it. I'm getting pretty good.
You
Starting to
are getting pretty good.
happen. And I am a visiting potter at the Potters Guild at this point. And as you know, because of COVID, a lot of arts organizations are just struggling. And I think the Potters Guild is no exception, although talk about resilient people. They are doing online events, they're giving pots to people that have contributed to the community. They're fantastic. So, starting today and through the 13th, the Potters Guild is having an online auction. Every day there's going to be about 20 pots. You can go in and click on the picture, and it gives a description of the pot. And then in the comments section, you make your bid. So not only are you going to get some beautiful artistic pieces for your home, but you're going to support this fantastic arts organization. So before I tell you how to get connected to the auction, I'm going to show you several of the pieces that will be available to you actually right now. Don't leave my show, but as soon as you're done with our show, go over to the Potters Guild. This is a beautiful picture by one of my teachers, Sarah Ladela. Isn't that fantastic? Interesting glaze. All right, this is available to you. I think this one's interesting too. Joan Witter made this piece. It matches my painting. I'll hold it closer so you can see it. There you go. This is a ceramic finial, maybe to put on top of a garden post. She's selling these in series of threes. This is done by Barbara Hranilovich. I always have a hard time saying her last name. I'll get it by the end of the year, Barb. Barb Hranilovich. Aren't those cool? Yeah. And then lastly, I am very reluctant to take this back. I think it is stunning. This is by Barb Hyman, and this is soda fired. And soda firing gives these sort of gorgeous, textural, bountiful, sumptuous, juicy. Anyway, this is Barb Hyman. So when you're done with us, go to the Greater Lansing Potters Guild Facebook page and you can access the online auction. It's going to be going every day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and it will be November 9th through the 13th. I hope you join us. So thank you.
And are there different pieces every day, Sunny?
Yes, different pieces every day. Everyone in the guild, including us visiting potters, have put in 5 pieces. So there's a representation of everyone at the guild. Isn't that great?
Oh, it's fantastic. I've been to their in-person show, but I really look forward to peopling their Facebook page over the next couple days.
Oh, good. Yeah, spread the word.
I will.
So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, master educator, a promoter of young teachers and educators. She had a great influence over my son's life because of the early childhood music program she started at Michigan State. Spectacular information and so much important stuff to give to our children. Dr. Cindy Taggart.
Oh, it's so lovely to be here with you, Sunny.
Um, The reason this came about is Ron and I took a little time away and went up north, and we had a socially distanced dinner with Cindy and Bruce, her husband, right on Lake Michigan. And the wind was blowing and the sun was setting, and they had this extraordinary fire in the pit, and we cooked our food over the pit. It was just, it was amazing.
It was pretty magical.
So you have recently retired from Michigan State. Tell us how that's going. What is your life like?
Oh, I love retirement. I'm still really busy, probably as busy as I was before I was retired. I'm president of the Gordon Institute for Music Learning nationally, so we're working on that. But I also own a contemporary American handcrafts gallery in Empire called The Secret Garden. And that's always been my play. And now I can play more full time there, which is great.
Yeah. I have to interject. Anybody that's from Michigan, you have to go to the Secret Garden. It is a jewel. It reminds me a little bit of Mackerel Sky that we had here in Lansing. You know, artistic things, craft things, just gorgeous, gorgeous artistic.
Yeah, we have about 200 and I would say 20 different artists. So from very little things to a few pair of earrings to great big wall art.
And
So
clothing too,
yeah,
spectacular clothing. Yeah. Now, are you open during the winter?
we will close January 1, but we're open every day except Christmas and Thanksgiving until then, and then open again May 1. So
May
it's
1.
fun.
And so I have to know this. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but do you do all the buying for the store?
I do, and I have for 32 years.
Whilst being a full-time professor and a full-time mom, you did all the buying for this store.
Yeah, it's been a busy life, which is why retirement's feeling kind of good.
Oh, I bet. When you were doing all of that, did you find were you stressed? Did you have to deal with stress or?
Oh yeah, there were more stressful times than others. It depended on what was going on in my life, but I was so grateful because Bruce really allowed me to follow my career,
Yeah.
and he was always there to mop up after me. When our kids were little, he tried to write his dissertation and did succeed indeed during kids' naps because he stayed at home with them while I was a young assistant professor. And I couldn't have done it without him. So I'm very grateful. But yes, there were some really stressful times. And yet I'm fairly resilient. And so I just kept moving, and then it was less stressful.
Do you have any suggestions or helpful hints for young professionals on how to handle those stressful moments when you're actually over engaged?
Yeah. Well, one thing that really helped me actually was yoga.
Yeah.
And it gave me some space for myself. It kept me in better physical shape, which allows you, I think, to be more resilient in general, both physically and emotionally and mentally. And I always had a variety of things in my life. So there were times when I would just drop school, even though I had way too much to do, and order things for the store, which felt like play. So I could get away and do something different. And that was always helpful.
In our family, we had this tradition, or maybe not tradition is maybe the wrong word, but we would work, play. And Christopher, my son, still follows that today. When work got too stressful, we'd go play. We'd go run in the woods. We'd go, play tag. We'd play some music, whatever. But I love that idea of working and then breathing and grounding and taking a moment.
Yeah, doing something for you and your relationship with others.
Yeah, yeah. Now, when you were first a professor, was that at Case Western?
It was. Yeah, I started there in, I think, 1988.
But before that, you were an elementary school music teacher?
I taught elementary general music and beginning band in Kenosha, Wisconsin for four
Great.
years. And then I went and did graduate work first at University of Michigan and then at Temple University. And at Temple University, I started teaching early childhood for the first time. So, and it's funny because when I left Temple, I didn't do any early childhood at Case, but that became part of my life again when I moved to Michigan State.
I bet you wanted to put it into
That
Case.
was one of the reasons I changed and left and went to Michigan State. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I have a question. Did, when you were teaching elementary school music, did you want to go into elementary school music, or was that what the job that was available to you?
I wanted to go into elementary general music.
Yeah.
Um, but oddly enough, I think at that point I defined myself at least as much as a band director
Sure.
because I was a French horn player. I started out actually as a performance horn player at University of Michigan as an undergrad, and then realized that I was too people oriented to spend that much time by myself in a practice room.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, and so it really didn't feel like the right fit for me, whereas education did.
Wow. Because it's sort of interesting that bookending your career is this fascination and delving into early childhood music and children. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's something so joyful about working with little people
Yeah.
because they are carrying so much less baggage than big people.
Isn't it?
And they're open and they're funny and they're just delightful. So it was a real gift to get to be on the floor with them every week.
And I remember when you were saying this, I was just pushed back in time to when I was learning how to play the trombone. We lived in Fairmont, Minnesota, and their band program, like Western states were, the band program was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it was sort of nationally touted. I've said this before on the show, but the high school band went to Washington, D.C., and played some of the inaugural activities for President Kennedy.
Wow.
They were fantastic. So I was nurtured and raised and sort of militaristically shoved into being an excellent trombone player for a little kid.
I
Yeah,
didn't even know you played trombone.
I did. I did. And I played first chair second. And the first chair first trombone player, Peter Shearer, is in contact with me on Facebook. How about that?
I have to say, I love Facebook for that reason.
I know. Um, and the thing that's interesting to me is that all those lessons that I had back then, I can almost see like a picture what I learned, how I learned it, where I practiced. They're much more concretely there than what I studied later.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
And there are so many things for me about French horn that transferred to sort of all of the things that I did professionally forever. So I'm grateful I had that background and experience.
Yeah. Do you have any regrets about putting the horn aside?
I do. And I wonder, there's a part of me that thinks, well, now that I'm retired, should I play horn again? But with French horn, you really need to play French horn or not play French horn.
It's like oboe.
Yeah, you can't kind of do it because there's so much muscle development and control involved. And because I got to a certain place earlier in my life, I'm not sure I would be willing to accept sounding that much worse than I did. So there's another part of me that thinks, well, maybe I should try a different instrument. And I may do that because there isn't sort of the history and the baggage that goes with that.
I have a friend in California who lives near Berkeley who is a creative maven. You would next time we visit, we will bring her to the store because she does encaustic painting. She's carves in marble. She's always doing something artistic. And one of the things she's done since college is play the cello. So
Oh,
she practices her cello an hour a day. Now she's 65 and she plays in the community orchestra. How cool is that?
yeah, and there are orchestras up here that I could do that with. And it would be nice to be a part of that kind of a community.
Yeah, I think so too. I,
Yeah.
that's a great, I love that. All right, we have got to talk about Ed Gordon and the early childhood music. What is the name of his institute?
The Gordon Institute for Music Learning, and that is the group that I'm serving as president of right now. Um, I decided Ed passed away 3 years ago now,
Yeah.
and I felt like now was an important time for the organization, so I decided to step up and serve.
Can you tell us a little bit about the early childhood learning theory for music?
Sure. First, I'm going to tell a little bit about Ed, if that's okay.
Oh, yes, please.
He is the person. I left a PhD in progress at University of Michigan and went to Temple University specifically to go to work with Ed.
Wow.
And he was is really one of the most important music educators in the past 100 years. In 1985, the Music Educators Journal, which is the national journal for music education, featured featured Ed and Suzuki and Dalcroze and Orff
Wow.
and Kodai, and called them the five major approaches to music education with Ed. So very renowned. But before he even became a music educator, he was a bass player with Gene Krupa.
I know. Do you remember that you brought him here?
Yeah,
We had a big dinner for him, and we hung out. And then he came over. We had you for dinner. He got out his bass, and we played music together.
it was fun. I remember.
I will never forget that. And he was lovely and charming, and we had a great time making music together.
Yeah. And so his he was a really terrific musician. Did you hear him sing?
No, I don't think I did.
He was a less good singer. But, but he was a terrific bass player and he had really good harmonic and rhythmic ears.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
And so he was very curious about how children learned music. And his whole education career, he has a doctorate in education, and his whole education career has sort of been focused on how do children learn? How do children sort of cognitively process music? And what does that mean for what we need to do for them as teachers? What kind of an environment do we need to provide? What kind of things do we need to, to do to help them become independent musicians?
Yes.
And his view is that we would, everyone is musical, every single person is musical. And that if children had as good music environments as they do language environments, we would have as many people who are fluent music improvisers as we do who are language improvisers. And, you know, right now you and I are improvising with language.
Exactly.
We understand its grammatical and syntactical structure, although we don't have to think about syntax because we're hardwired as a result of our experience with language, our immersion in a language environment. And so if children had that same kind of environment musically, they would become fluent music speakers rather than just reinterpreters of others' music. they would have things to say themselves musically, which is, it's been really fun because I look at the people who have come out of our music program, our early childhood music program, and they're people like Chris, your son, who I don't think would have been satisfied just performing and following a conductor's suggestions from the podium. Chris had things to say, and as a result, he's composed.
And as a matter of fact, Cindy, it's so interesting to me. Um, it's hard to determine what is his native gift and what was enhanced by all the early childhood music. And it's hard to discern those, but I know for a fact that he was immensely impacted by those lessons. Um, he, we started with Cindy and Bruce at 3 months old. Not me, Chris was 3 months old. And I was holding my little baby and skipping and singing and doing rhythms in odd meters and even meters. And then little by little, Chris started taking over. And I have so many stories about the classes, which I'll share as we go on. But when he was in the seventh grade, he won a contest that was put on by the Lansing Symphony, where they played a movement of his fifth symphony. Okay.
That is
And
so cool.
it's so cool. And he developed the skill of sitting at the kitchen counter and composing. So all those things that you were talking about and Ed Gordon was talking about, he practiced. He heard inside of his head and cognitively knew what to do.
Yeah.
So he is a big testament to your program.
Well, and there are other children who are as well. I think the children who came out of our program were substantively different kinds of musicians than ones who didn't have experience as much as rich an environment when they were really little. You know, I still remember Chris. When Chris was in this class, it was mostly babies. It was really little kids, and they were in their car seats. And I would sing a song, you know, yeah, and I'd leave that space, and I could leave lots of silence. And finally, the children would just sort of look at me with their mouths open and their hands open, almost in a yoga pose, like they're soaking it all in, almost in mountain pose, and in their car seats. And all of a sudden, after all of the silence, Chris made a sound. And it was like this dam burst, because all of the other little kids all of a sudden started making musical sounds. I imitated them, and there was this conversation musically that started going on as a result of sort of my giving them musical toys to play with by singing, and then leaving silence so that they had room to play.
Oh, I'm getting chills.
Yeah, it was so, that was a long time ago, and I still remember that moment.
Lydian, right?
Yeah. Good ears, Sonny, not surprised.
Well, I have to tell you all something. I was a music major in college. We studied modes. Look them up. We won't go into all what they mean. They're scales. As part of classical theory. I'm going to tell you though, do you know when I learned my modes and could differentiate and hear them and sing them? It was through going to Bruce and Cindy's early childhood music classes and drilling them with physical movement and rhythm and singing little melodies in the modes that make you identify where you are rhythmically, tonally, spatially. And I love that it's not airy fairy. You're not, oh, I'm just hearing it. No, you know it. You're cognitively figuring it out.
Well, one of the things actually for me about Ed Gordon's music learning theory and about teaching early childhood music that I found really compelling is it made me a better musician.
Yes, it made you, yes.
And every time that I teach, I try to challenge myself a little bit musically, learn a new tune, function in a new tonality, function in a new meter, just push myself a little bit, make sure I'm audiating bass lines. I'm hearing those bass lines in my head when I'm singing the melodies.
Yes.
And I think in some ways, teaching becomes a selfish act in that way because it's not just being selfless. It's not only going out, but it's also going in, and it's also my own growth and learning as a musician. And I
Oh,
found that really compelling.
isn't that, that's wonderful. I mean, that's beautiful. So you used a word there that I'd like you to explain, audiation. Would you talk about audiation?
Sure. Audiation is hearing music in your head and giving it meaning. And when I say giving it meaning, I don't mean in the traditional meaning of words, but giving it meaning in terms of knowing how it fits tonally and rhythmically into sort of systems. And it's not something you really talk about, it's something you just own. So that if I were to sing a song, if I were to sing Stars and Stripes Forever, um, you would, and asked you to pat your lap to the beat, you would have a hard time patting your lap not to beat because you so own the rhythm system that all of the rhythms of Stars and Stripes Forever are hung onto. And
Yeah.
so there are tonal systems and rhythm systems like that, that the pitches and the rhythms of all of our music are hung onto. And so when we're audiating, we can predict what's coming next. In the same way that if I said, I'm really tired now after this interview, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get in my pajamas and I'm going to go to, and you would predict that I'm either going to go to sleep or I'm going to go to bed, or, you were able, based on the meaning, to predict where I was going.
Yes.
And we can do that same thing musically, which is when I sang that song a minute ago in Lydian and left that last note off, you knew it wasn't over
Yeah.
because we hadn't tonally resolved to home.
Yes.
And audiation is sort of hearing where home is tonally, it's feeling where multiple levels of beat are rhythmically. And those are things that we just own once we're really beginning to audiate. And early childhood music program, really, the purpose of it is to surround children in a really developmentally appropriate, playful, rich music environment, let them interact with it in whatever way they want. It's not about correctness, so that they develop that syntactical system tonally and rhythmically so that they can audiate richly and well.
Oh, you said that beautifully. Yeah, that one. Well, I did go on the Ed Gordon website and I wrote down a definition of audiation because I just think that's such an interesting word and process. And you covered all the bases, Mama. Just saying.
Glad to hear it.
One thing I will never forget to is bop bop ba bop
Bum,
bop bop.
bum. So that bum, that's the resting tone, that's the home tone. And so, oh, quit singing, Cindy.
No,
Whenever,
Cindy sang.
whenever I would sing a song, yum bum ba dum bum ba, yum ba dum ba dum bum ba, yum ba dum ba dum bum ba, yum ba dum ba dum bum bum, yum ba dum bum.
Ba.
So letting the kids, pointing out to the kids sort of the gateposts of the tonality, sort of the most important pitches, helping them hear where home is, where the tonic or the resting tone is for each pitch, so that they can cognitively organize what they're hearing tonally.
Yeah.
So making it a little bit more explicit for them at first. I seem to be in a Lydian mood today. I'm singing in Lydian lots.
It's so funny you singing these melodies just pops me right back because I haven't heard those since Chris was little. And unfortunately, just when it was starting to get more complex, my son wanted to drop out. You probably don't remember this. And I figured out, we talked about it later, but it's kind of a cosmic joke actually. My child was extremely rhythmically complex as a little one and could not carry a tune in a bucket. He just couldn't. And what I realized later, I think I'm right on this, is, when he was 3 years old, he could get out and run like an athlete and he could throw a frisbee as well as an adult. But he got very frustrated with like trying to paint. His fine motor skills had not developed. And that's what I think about the vocal things too. The, singing's a fine motor skill. And it just took him longer to develop it. And he
Well,
was
and I
so frustrated that he couldn't
right.
hear
Well,
it. He just couldn't sing it.
well, I remember my son Sam when he had had lots of early childhood music first, and then he started to play violin. And I thought that that violin was going to fly across the room at some point because he had so much going on in his head and he couldn't really realize it on the instrument because he didn't have the technique. He didn't have the executive skills yet. He was audiating. But the funny thing that that did for him was it drove his technique because he wanted it so bad
Yes.
that his technique developed much more quickly than a lot of the kids around him
Oh, I
because
bet.
he had a goal. He had something his brain was telling him it was supposed to sound like, and he was going to make it sound like that, darn it.
Yes. And while you're talking too, I realize, Chris was a natural French horn player. He did not have to work very hard at it. As a matter of fact, that was one of the things that he realized didn't want to be a professional horn player because he just didn't enjoy practicing that much, right? He loves
Yeah.
composing, but I wonder if all the early childhood music training that he did helped him get quickly good on that instrument,
I'm sure it
But
did.
yeah.
I mean, it seems to. The piano faculty at the community music school say they can always tell when the child has been in our program because then it's about teaching the technical skills on the instrument and attaching it to what's already going on in their head, which is really rich and complex, rather than trying to get something going on in their head and in their body to work with the instrument all at the same time.
And I'm thinking about some of the people that want to be professional singers, for example, that have this beautiful instrument but have none of that richness.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult to train it when you're older. It can be done, but you have to work twice as hard. Boy, you have to
Well,
work hard on,
yeah.
no, that is not the melody. You must learn the melody accurately, rhythmically, and melodically in the center of the pitch, by the way. Practice harder.
Always good advice. Yeah,
Always
and
follow.
I do think that for kids who have had a really rich environment, that happens automatically. That happens naturally to some extent. I mean, it doesn't happen automatically because we've created that environment for them. But when they're exposed to that environment, some children really just take it all in and it's all there ready and looking for a way out. And composing in French horn for Chris was one of those ways. Violin was one of those ways for Sam. Cello was one of those ways for my younger son.
Yeah. Are they both playing still? And what are they doing?
Um, Sam is on sabbatical. He's a computer science professor at Oberlin, and he's on sabbatical right now and practicing 3 or 4 hours every single day on his violin and is getting such joy at sort of coming back to how strong he was technically and musically when he was sort of at the height of his playing. And James is a PhD student in biology at MIT, finishing probably in the next year or year and a half. And he occasionally pulls his cello out, but right now as a doc student, he doesn't have a whole lot of time to do that. So,
Oh, sure. Now I remember Okemos High School had this tradition. I'm not going to give it any kind of qualifier, that every senior got to play a concerto.
Right.
Every senior got to play a concerto.
Yeah.
So, number one, this concert was endless. It was easily 4 hours long. And let me just put it this way, there were a few highlights, very few highlights.
But there
And
were some really good ones.
oh, there really were. And I'm kind of teasing. It was a wonderful undertaking. I'm sure the kids will never forget it. But I still remember Sam's, and I still remember James. And I
Yeah.
remember Jordan Lulof's and Chris Newman's. Right?
And those were all children who've been in the early childhood program. They also have musical parents, so they have music happening at home. But yeah,
Well, Jordan Lulof and Chris were two of the babies in that baby class.
right.
Janet and I would go together and load our kids up and go to music class.
Yeah. It was really fun for me to see these kids and how they have grown and how music has become a really, really important part of who they are for life.
For life.
And the early childhood music program for me isn't about trying to develop little Mozarts. It's not about trying to develop professional musicians. It's about giving children a way to express themselves, giving them a way to interpret the expressions of others in a richer, deeper, more meaningful way. And for some kids that may manifest itself by their becoming a member of their praise band at church, and for others it may manifest itself in their playing instruments or singing in school or composing or playing in a garage band. But all of those things are perfectly natural outgrowths of the kinds of audiation skills that get developed in early childhood.
Well, and the other thing is you're developing neural pathways, right? You're
Right.
developing connections. And those connections can also make poets and writers and city planners and good lawyers and good doctors and
Right.
good, music teachers. And I just think exposure to the arts has so many other ramifications and consequences rather than just making professional musicians.
Right.
No, I always, people say, oh, I shouldn't sing. I go, oh no, everybody, please sing.
Right.
Sing at the top of your lungs. Sing in Myers. Well, not now, but I,
Do it
I
with a mask at least.
yeah. In before there was internet or social media or television, people sat around the piano and sang and played instruments and amused each other and collected and congregated and made music. And I I love that we're still doing it, and I hope we do it more. Really.
Well, and one of the things about that I love too about the early childhood music program is that it helped parents learn how to musically parent. So it changed the way in which they interacted with their children musically at home. It changed the way in which they interpreted their children's behavior,
Yes.
because often what happens is parents assume that whenever a child makes a vocal sound, that they interpret that as if it were language. But sometimes now parents are interpreting that as if it might be a musical response or a musical sound. And that as if interpretation really facilitates learning in that domain.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
So when a child I might be singing a song and I leave a minute of silence or a few seconds of silence, and a child might go, Papa. And I'll look at the child and go, Papa, imitate the child's sound, leave some space, see if we can get a musical Papa conversation going, a rhythmic conversation going. And if we can, great, I'll keep imitating. I'll start putting in some novel things. If the child just looks at me, I might take that Papa utterance and use it as in an improvisation. Papa, Papa, ba 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 ba. And it's so interesting because the children, when they hear me take that little cell that was their cell, and you heard that I used it multiple times in the improvisation, it was central to that improvisation. The children just look at me like I am saying the most important thing in the world.
Well, they were being heard.
Right,
Yeah. And
right.
echoed and reflected too.
And I have seen as a result of parents bringing their kids to the music class that they start responding in some of those similar ways to
Yeah.
the children's utterances musically and in terms of language. And it's so cool to see sort of that unfold in terms of parenting behavior.
That is, you're taking me back because, of course, we did that with Chris all the time, and I've kind of forgotten it. I've forgotten it, except one time I was taking care of a little baby who was very disquieted. It turned out this child was severely autistic. He was so uncomfortable being in my surroundings. He just couldn't, it was too much. He couldn't take it. And the way we calmed him down and the way I communicated him with him was like that. It was like, ba, 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 ba. And he would go, and he'd go, ba, 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 ba. And he responded to that. So I didn't even talk to him. I sang like Cindy would. And it was such a soothing thing for him. And it connected with him.
Right. Yeah, I had a child who I had it as a very young infant to maybe about 18 months, maybe 2 years in the early childhood program. And I saw the child's mother in, I think it was at the Michigan Athletic Club. And she came up to me and said, "You may not remember me, but my daughter was in your early childhood music class. And I just want you to know that you changed my daughter's life. Because when she came into this music class, she had been diagnosed as autistic and she had never made a connection with anyone before. And and in the early childhood music class, she I didn't even know that. And she was so engaged and she was looking at me and she was making sounds with me. And the mother just said, "I'm so grateful," because it was sort of like a dam broke for her during that time in terms of her ability to connect and to engage. And she said, and she's playing in state honors band and she's singing in choir. And, so there were both, yeah, it did support her and her growth musically, but it also paid other really important dividends.
Oh, Cindy, what
Yeah.
that's just you must have so many rich experiences like that with people coming back, including the students you're educating to do this out in their world, that you're training teachers to teach this to the children.
Well, and I have been really gratified that some of the real strongest musicians in the College of Music have ended up gravitating toward early childhood music teaching. Yeah.
So
And,
great.
I think when people think of early childhood music, they think, well, they're going to sing the Wheels on the Bus and the Eensy Weensy Spider and do all of those kinds of things. And yet, I think when parents bring their children and when the undergraduates come and work with me in the early childhood music settings, they are surprised at how musically challenging this environment is. In fact, often the young children become more competent at some of these tonalities more quickly than the undergraduates.
Isn't
So
it
it's
something
really
that's
fun to
really,
watch.
yeah, that's great. And do you keep track of through the Gordon Institute, do you keep track of the universities and high schools or that they're doing his program across the country and the world?
Well, not in an official way. We have our membership list and sort of see who's teaching where. And so through that, we know kind of who's doing it. But I'm sure there are lots of people who are teaching using Ed Gordon's music learning theory that are not even members of the Institute. And I know, just because I have been so connected in this community for so long, I know many of the people who are doing this. And there are people who are doing this at the University of South Carolina and Eastman and here, and University of Texas at Arlington, and Hope College in Eastern Michigan, and people at University of Houston. There are people all over the country doing this, and I'm missing some people, and if I missed people, I'm sorry. But there, it has found homes in a lot of university early childhood programs, and then in a lot of elementary general music classrooms around the country.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really fun to see.
Well, that leads me to a question, and that is, since you have retired, I understand that the early childhood music program is in good hands and alive and well for people that may be interested in bringing their children or grandchildren to you.
Yeah, Karen Salvador is the early childhood and elementary general music specialist at Michigan State, and she is a music learning theory trained teacher, and she is carrying on sort of the tradition of the early childhood program, developing it, making it her own, but still sort of based upon the same beliefs about music teaching and learning. And so it was so easy for me to retire knowing that the program that I developed and felt so strongly about was going into her hands, because I knew it would continue and it would grow and it would develop under her guidance. And the COVID, I think, for all education right now has made things really challenging, and early childhood music is one of those things. So they are still offering early childhood music classes through Zoom. So they're doing Zoom classes, so you don't even really need to be nearby to do it. But I'm sure that and they also actually are offering a class for parents without children on musical parenting. And here are songs, and here are things, ways of being musically with your child.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and so they're offering that, and I think the new semester will start again in January with all of this. And I suspect next January they'll still be online probably for the rest of the school year, and then I suspect they might be able to, here's hoping, might be able to get back to in-person classes, because it's so much fun to just be in this community of playful little people and parents.
It's joyful.
It is. Actually, I remember you saying, I don't want Chris to be too old for this, because I look forward to it every week.
I was really unhappy when he made the decision. That he was,
Yeah.
I was, no. No.
Well, and it's so fun because the kids get comfortable with the other parents, and they'll walk around the classroom and plop on parents' laps who aren't their parent. And it creates this warm, joyful, loving, inclusive community of music makers, because we almost don't talk at all for the entire 45 minutes.
That's right.
All we do is sing and chant and play and engage musically and rhythmically and physically.
And move. We make stews.
Lots of movement, lots of free and flowing movement.
Yeah, what else can you put in?
Right. What did we put in the soup? Let's put in eyeballs. Let's put in marshmallows. Let's put in chocolate ice cream. And again, you hear me not talking. Now I'm talking, but let's put in chocolate ice cream, using 1 and 5. The sort of the gate posts again tonally, so that the music keeps swirling around cognitively, because when you start talking, that kind of falls to the floor.
Yes. You switch gears.
Right. The neurons that are dedicated to language take over, and the neurons that are musical neurons quit firing as much.
So next time we come and visit, will you play with me? Will you take, can we do a class?
We can.
I miss it. One thing I wanted to say is if people are interested in checking this out, either as parents or for their children, do they contact the community music school?
Yeah, the community music school actually has a program both in East Lansing and another program in Detroit. So right on Woodward Avenue, and there are classes in both places. So you would just search Michigan State University Community Music School, and if you Google it, it will take you to the places you need to be.
Oh, yeah, great, great, great.
Yeah, and I am so grateful that my own kids sort of had that program. I couldn't teach the classes that they were in because I didn't want to be giving more attention to my own children than the other children in the room. But by the time they were taking classes, I had undergraduates and graduate students who could teach, and I could go as a parent.
Oh, I love that.
And that was so fun for me. It was really fun.
We took more than several times from a graduate student or an undergraduate, I don't know which, but they were all wonderful,
Yeah.
beautifully trained, engaged, smart, outgoing.
Well, we don't give them full responsibility for a class unless all of those things are in place.
Yeah, I bet.
So they usually take the class at the university first and then do it, and then I hire them to work as assistants for a little while. And when I feel, or when Karen feels now that they are ready, then we give them a class and let them fly.
I love that. Well, you also seem like you have, oh, don't break one of the pots. You seem like you have a very purposeful and intentional teaching style that is full of warmth and graciousness and embracing and encouragement. And I'm sure your standards are impossibly high, but because of who you are and the way you put all that forward, people flock to you and want to learn from you and want to be with you. And I
Well,
think
I
that,
love doing it. And, teaching needs to be improvisation.
ah,
Teaching isn't about a lesson plan. Teaching is about having lots of options and meeting the needs of the people in the room at the moment.
oh, I love that. Yes.
And so I almost think of it as a menu rather than a lesson plan.
A
And
menu.
children and parents order off the menu through their musical behaviors in the class, and I, the chef, quick cook it for them and offer it to them. And so if they want dessert first, we go there.
That's, I love that idea. Well, one time we were with the Ruggieros, who, Charles Ruggiero was a professor of theory and a wonderful composer at Michigan State. And we were talking about intuition, right? And how I was saying my teaching style at this point is intuitive, right?
Right.
What does the student need and what do they need now? Well, I think they need that. Well, where are we going over here? Let's move it over here and let's do this. And at the end of the lesson, hopefully there is more knowledge and more freedom, right? And
Right.
he gave a beautiful definition of intuition because I was sort of apologizing for that. I thought that it was, a little undisciplined, if you will. He goes, Sonny, intuition is the sum total of everything you've studied and everything you've worked for and everything that you've embodied, and then you just let it go. And
Right.
that's what a master teacher is.
And beginning teachers don't have enough experience to have good intuition usually yet.
Right.
They
You
need
don't have
more
enough tools.
experience. They need more time on the ground
Yeah.
to explore and see what happens when.
Oh, yes. Isn't that true?
Yeah, and so The people who are really master teachers and improvisers as teachers and can really meet the needs of their students in the moment, that's a lifetime accumulation of learning and experience and knowledge.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And you know, every single time we teach, we accumulate more of that.
It's true. It really is true.
And we don't always make the right decisions, even with lots of experience and knowledge.
Well, and that's the crapshoot of teaching that way. Every once in a while, you're going to miss the doc. It's like, that did not go well.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, that did not go well. And all right, let's think about that. Let's reflect on that for a little while and figure out how we can turn the ship around.
And sometimes, sometimes it's not your fault. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you have from my experience, sometimes you have an audience that has no energy, or they're so scattered, or they're not willing to give anything back to you, and you can't turn them around, or some things it's beyond your control.
And see, that's one of the things I like about working with really little ones is because that happens, I think, less often.
Yeah.
You'll see shy ones, and there'll be really shy children who won't let any of it come back out again, but it's all going in and they're still watching me like mad. And there are other children who are walking around the room and seemingly not paying attention, and then all of a sudden you go up and chant a pattern at them and they give it back to you absolutely correctly. And so you, different people respond in such different ways, and you need to leave space for that for them.
Oh, what a lesson for me. You need to learn to leave space for that. Right?
And
Yes.
the better we are at that, the easier it's going to be for us to reach them all.
Well, and think about what you just said translates and moves over into every interaction we have in our lives.
Yep.
Some people appear to be angry or not listening, but given space, and how you communicate, it's just it follows through to a lot of different areas.
Yeah, and it's definitely a useful life skill.
Yeah. Oh, Cindy, this has been fantastic.
It's such a treat for me to see you. You know, having you in those classes was such a joy for me because I could always count on someone else to be musical and playful with me.
Absolutely. I was ready to play with you, Mama.
And that was joyful.
Oh, yes. Well, I think we are about ready to close off, and I have a few other things to say, but is there anything else you'd like to share or say with these wonderful people watching?
Just give children as rich a music environment as you can and listen to them musically.
Amen, sister. That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Next time on Lighten Up with Sonny Wilkinson, I still get a kick saying that. I just love the title. Uh, Lighten Up with Sonny Wilkinson. Jamie Sue Seal thought of that title, by the way. And I have to thank Smokin' Sled Dog Records and my now dear friends and compatriots in crime, Jamie Sue Seal and Susan O'Rourke, who helped me put this together logistically. They've done all the beautiful promo. And they have my back. We're a sisterhood, and it means the world to me to have that community. So thank you, ladies. Love you. Next time, November 23rd, 2 o'clock. Oops, something just happened on my there. There you are. November 23rd, my band, the Sonny Wilkinson Band, is going to be on. Because you know what? It's near Thanksgiving, and that is my Thanksgiving. I am so thankful for those boys, men, in my life. Larry Ogletree, who lives in Battle Creek, is my drummer. Ed Fidowa, bassist in Lansing, fantastic bass player, plays in my band, and my husband, Ron Newman, who is an extraordinary jazz piano player, is my pianist. And the four of us are going to yuck it up and share some music and share some stories. And you'll find out some other interesting sides of all of these wonderful musicians. So I hope you can join us. Until then, stay joyful and enjoy this beautiful warm fall weather while we have it. Cindy, thank you so much for being with us. You
Oh,
are a
thank
light.
you,
Thank
Sunny.
you. Mwah. Goodbye, everybody.